Even in this initial report, there is so much of ambiguity and it is going around in circles. The first thing they talk about is aircraft had engine failure on takeoff and the RAT deployed. RAT is a device which gives you hydraulic power emergency man. And in that situation, right after that, they're talking about fuel fuel switch going from run to cutoff. My point is very simple. When you don't have the engines in the first place, when the engines are failed, जब fuel नहीं जा रहा engine को, तो why does the point come up of fuel cutoff? That's my first point. What they're trying to do is put the blame deliberately on the pilots and exonerate the OEM, and that is not correct. I'd like to call and urge the Ministry of Civil Aviation to please bring in transparency, bring in clarity, and bring in justification. Mr. Modi is a very firm person as Prime Minister. He has repeatedly talked about transparency in government. He's talked about ethics in ministry. That we need to see. And if required, Modi ji must intervene in this.
First of all, as we know that the preliminary report of AI 171 is out, we want to understand your analysis of the report. What do you think of the report?
Thank you for having me on ANI and a pleasure to be with you. We have to understand this report is an initial report, but even in this initial report, there is so much of ambiguity and it is going around in circles. The first thing they talk about is aircraft had engine failure on takeoff and the RAT deployed. RAT is a device which gives you hydraulic power emergency man. And in that situation, right after that, they're talking about fuel switch going from run to cutoff. My point is very simple. When you don't have the engines in the first place, when the engines are failed, जब fuel नहीं जा रहा engine को, तो why does the point come up of fuel cutoff? That's my first point. Now, what they're trying to do is put the blame deliberately on the pilots and exonerate the OEM, and that is not correct. Because if the engine failed, fuel cutoff की logic नहीं आती. Fuel cutoff logic comes only when the procedure, the memory item and procedure and QRH for starting the engine is you have to put the switch back into cutoff and bring it back on. Now that is something which has happened, but that has happened when the engines have already failed. So it doesn't make sense. And second, which is very shocking, is why did the report come out at 2 a.m. in the morning when the aircraft is Indian, 200 passengers who have perished in the crash are Indian, 54 are British nationals. It is close of business for the UK. But you're releasing it at 2 a.m. for the American audience. That does not make sense at all. And in an initial report where you have 9 more months of full investigation, why in the report last night you are saying Boeing and GE is no longer to be involved in this anymore? You have 9 more months of investigation. So I'd like to call and urge the Ministry of Civil Aviation to please bring in transparency, bring in clarity, and bring in justification. Mr. Modi is a very firm person as Prime Minister. He has repeatedly talked about transparency in government. He's talked about ethics in ministry. That we need to see. And if required, Modi ji must intervene in this and must raise this with the Ministry of Civil Aviation because the people demand to know. 265 families have lost a loved one. And this is probably the worst air disaster in 40 years. And this investigation will have a global impact. World pilots are not stupid. World pilots know the truth. And a pilot who puts his life on the line for his family's livelihood will not fall for this report. Even they are aware. And all I'm going to do is, my request is through ANI, I want this message to go out very clearly that it's time we take this investigation seriously. This is not about a witch hunt to blame the pilots. It's about a fair and just investigation.
So there are many things that has been covered in the preliminary report. For example, when told how the conversation between the pilots were mentioned, and that the engine fuel cutoff switches moved to from run to cutoff within just 1 second. So, in your expertise, what do you think could be the cause of it? Could be it mechanical defect, electrical glitch, or software malfunction?
So I think the first question we have to answer is the first thing was there was engine failure.
Hmm.
When the engines have already failed, when there's no fuel going to the engines, then why bring it to off position? There is no fuel. That's my
Hmm.
point. Even if the pilot brought it into off position, he brought it back onto run position. He's taken it back and he's brought it back in 1 second, less than 1 second. इसका मतलब there has been a conscious effort to try starting the engine. Now
Hmm.
the report is contradicting what it says. First the report says engine failure rat, and then it points to this. And the way the communication between pilot and co-pilot is written, it is written without incorporating other communication. When there is an emergency in the cockpit is never silent. It is noisy. People are trying to figure what happened. People are calling out situations, talking to each other, trying to rectify. So that is lacking. This initial report is inconclusive and it's biased. You're not doing your job as the investigating authority. And this should have had more time. If you really wanted more time, the AAIB should have taken more time, but not come out with something which is questionable, which is designed to implicate and blame the pilots for no reason without a comprehensive investigation.
Sir, one more thing that I wanted to ask. In the report itself, it is mentioned about the FAA issued Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin in 2018 regarding the potential disengagement of fuel control switch locking feature. Although the operator model was different from this operator model, but do you think this can also be considered as like how statement in the report?
So, Shifali, this particular part number, which is the Honeywell part number of that fuel switch, it is installed on this aircraft. It is the same part number is aircraft may have. It's not that it's not there. Now, the point is, this has been a problematic issue in 2016. Airlines reported that after landing or during taxi, the switch used to go back to cutoff position. Okay, this has been reported. A lot of airlines have had this problem. इसीलिए the FAA came out with the AIB, Airworthiness Information Bulletin. Okay, now if that is so, and by the way, I want to flag one more thing. Apart from this switch AIB from FAA, there was another AIB which pointed fingers to the microchip in the engine control unit. Okay. They also said that that microchip is creating problems. It was identified to that. Now, this means that this initial report is not comprehensive at all. It is just a initial outline. Okay, now my point is, are we taking this too seriously? And why is the US media blaming the pilots outright for this crash when there is no comprehensive investigation? We must respect the dead. पायलट्स की जान they've lost their lives. उनकी आत्मा को शांति मिलेगी अभी. Their families also mourning the loss of loved ones. The government has to be responsible now. And I'm urging Narendra Modi ji as our Honorable Prime Minister to please oversee this investigation immediately.
Yes.
It cannot be biased.
The center has also come up with a statement after the report, after the preliminary report. They have said that we should not jump on conclusions based on the pilot's conversation. Where we all know that during the conversation, the pilot also in the report pilot seems clueless as to how it went to cut off from run to cut off. So, what do you want to say on that statement?
First of all, you and I and everybody should not have preview to something which is just taken out of context. That is not the full dialogue. Where is the full recording? I demand the AAIB to release the full cockpit audio recording. That full cockpit audio recording will not match the excerpt and the transcript in the PIR. It will not match because it's totally different. They have paraphrased only one section of the recording into the report. Why are they doing it? And the Ministry of State and Center is correct. It is the initial report. But why, if the Ministry of State is saying it is initial report, फिर आपने उसको 2 बजे रात में क्यों रिलीज की थी? किसके लिए आपने रिलीज की थी? क्या भारत की मीडिया इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है? हमारे भारत के लोग, our population, our people, our citizens are not important to you. There are a lot of questions which have to be asked on this. And this is why, again, I'm repeating myself. I'm urging Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji to please intervene. We cannot have an unbiased, we cannot have a biased investigation report, because 787, this aircraft is flying across the world. And even as we speak, there is a rippling effect with operators across the world. They're also anxious. They're also scared of flying this aircraft now. And India holds the key, and we need to show leadership. And this is very important, that leadership comes from the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji.
Sir, lastly, one more thing I would want to ask. There are different aviation experts coming out saying different things about pilots who were in the cockpit during the incident, saying that it seems like they did purposely. So, how do you see such statement being hearing this from pilot about pilots?
Look, I know which pilot you're talking about. Captain Ranganathan mentioned that this could be suicide. That is the most ridiculously stupid thing a pilot can say about another pilot without having any evidence, any information, or any logic. Okay? You are blaming a pilot, a family man, for willfully killing 280 people on board. You're blaming a pilot who's dead because he cannot talk because he's dead. You're blaming him for murder? On what grounds? This garbage and this ridiculous conspiracy theories, these notions must stop. And the only reason this can stop is if there is a proactive communication channel being announced by the government. जब Malaysian Airlines MH370 का crash हुआ था, if you remember, Malaysian government every week used to come out with press conferences. Every week the media used to be briefed. Every week the media was made aware. Why don't we have that kind of media clarity today in this crash? It's a crash of global importance. And such people who are passing such baseless, ridiculous rumors and conspiracies should not even be entertained by the press. At this stage, we cannot speculate. We have to respect the people who have perished in this crash, and this investigation should be an investigation with maturity. And again, for the 5th time, I'm repeating, I urge the Prime Minister to please intervene.
Sir, in the report also, there's a last 2 lines that are mentioned saying that the Boeing and GE, at this stage of investigation, there are no recommended actions to B787 and GE engine operators and manufacturers. Although we understand as well that the report is at its initial stage, and the investigation agency is also going forward to understand to which direction particularly they have to go. How do you see now the further agency is going to move in which direction as per the report?
So ANI, firstly, I think it's extremely biased that in the initial preliminary stage, the report is exonerating and holding Boeing and GE harmless. जब आपने पूरा इन्वेस्टिगेशन कंप्लीट नहीं किया है, आपने कंक्लूड नहीं किया है, आगे जाके कुछ और एविडेंस आने का चांस है, you're in a likely situation of getting more information. Why are you exempting Boeing and GE from it now when it is just the initial stage? And also I want to say that when you're flying and when you're taking off in an emergency, जब आपके engines चले गए, engine failure, it is recorded that there is an engine failure, a pilot will not be stupid to go back to put the switch off and again switch it on. जब फ्यूल है ही नहीं, इंजन बंद हो गई है, तो फ्यूल ऑफ क्यों करोगे? या
Hmm.
तो ये हो सकता है कि वो द पायलट वाज ट्राइंग टू फॉलो द प्रोसीजर बाय पुटिंग इट ऑफ एंड पुटिंग इट ऑन. This is most likely to what happened, but the report is not mentioning that clearly. They are twisting it, and they are allowing people to have their own assumptions when that is not needed.